With over 800,000 followers on X, one might start to wonder what makes this artist stand out from the rest. The backbone of Dino's art style is of course the lighting. Throughout my investigations, I found many of Dino's hidden lighting tricks, so I organized everything into 3 levels, starting from the very basics to complex lighting setups. There's a bonus level as well if you stick around till the end. Let's go. Dino will very often do the first take sketches with just a character in a white background. Now what set his work apart from many other artists is of course his incredible understanding of anatomy and posing, which I have covered in part 1 of the series here. But another factor is Dino takes lighting very seriously, even if it's just a white background. And let me tell you, a white background is not easy to handle at all. You see, there's this invisible light source that's present in most lighting scenarios, granted if you live on the same planet as I am. Let's assume for a second that's just a white room with walls. All the light rays that are in the room will bounce around the walls and the floor, creating a subtle global lighting in all directions. This shifts the entire value scheme towards the lighter end. If we take another piece that's not set in a white background like this and we do the eyedropper test, you see what I mean. You can see in this fern piece the difference in value between the shadow parts and the highlights on the face is very subtle. But in this piece where the background is darker and presumably having lesser ambient light, the value of the shadow side drops much more. And it's important to pay attention to these subtle shifts because this value structure will probably look weird if we stick the character in a white background. So yes, this actually matters. I'm just gonna go through a few more of these drawings here. You can pretty much see the consistency of the values Dino uses. It's almost like he found the perfect formula here. Now, of course, there are exceptions. For example, in this piece that also has a white background, the face, however, goes darker than it normally does. This could be due to a variety of reasons. It could be an artistic choice to express the darker and more mysterious vibe of the character, or it could be because of the direction of the light is different here. In this one, the main key light is coming from the top rather from the side, like in these other drawings. The cast shadow on the face makes it darker, and because her black skirt is kind of covering the ground, there's less reflected light coming back on her face. In a white light only situation, there's no sneaky manipulation of the perceived colors to the viewers, so everything sticks back to their own local colors and values. On one hand, this makes it easier to draw because you don't have to do weird mental gymnastics to try to figure out these extra stuff. But on the other hand, things can go a little flat if you're not careful. Under flat lighting conditions like this, Dino strategically uses local color and values to spice up the contrast in these drawings. By using darker colors for the accessories on the character's clothing, Dino maximizes the entire value range here, which helps with making the piece look more dynamic and punchy. You might think, okay, this is kind of simple looking, you know, like I get it, but what about adding more light sources like the classic 3-point lighting? Well, let me show you how Dino did all of these with only 2 lights. By just tweaking the balance between these 2 light sources, we can achieve a far greater range of results that you might think. As I sort of hinted earlier, we want light to come from an angle most of the time if we want the drawing to look more dynamic. Light from the front or too much ambient light generally makes the face look flatter. This works fantastic on a Vogue magazine cover, but not for Dino's drawings. Because Dino's art style is directly derived from the classical Renaissance style, and I believe he used to do oil painting as well, by limiting the number of lights, he creates these really dramatic lighting scenarios. The difference between the intensity of the key light and the ambient light is now really big, unlike in the first level. This creates really strong light and shadow contrast in the drawing. You often hear artists say to focus on big shapes, but no one's actually telling you how. This subtle difference between the value of the face and the value of the right shoulder here showcases the effect of light fall off, while simultaneously helps redirecting focus to the face because bright face contrasts against black hat. Simple. But the real trick here is how Dino sneakily grouped the values together to enhance the readability. I'll just show you. There are 2 ways you can see how Dino grouped the values here. And this second one is how Dino further pushes the focus up to the face. Rim lights like this and top lighting like this is also some pretty standard ways to quickly add mood and drama to a piece. In this piece, the ambient light is blue colored. This stains the material materials like the skin with a subtle shade of blue, contrasting really well against Bei's red hair. If you don't know what this is, basically color light will affect the perceived color of the materials it reflects off of. And I'm really glad that the guys at Skillshare are sponsoring the video because they have this perfect 3-part class by pro illustrator Dennis Zilber that covers these exact topics in depth about color and light. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives like you and me. Whether you're into music, photography, design, entrepreneurship, or art, especially art, Skillshare has a class made just for you. These classes are carefully designed by industry professionals to help you maximize your learning experience, and each class is curated into a skill tree called Learning Paths, ultimately leading to mastery of a skill. Not only that, Skillshare also encourages you guys to share projects after completing a class. This is probably one of my favorite things about Skillshare because I get to learn by doing stuff instead of just passively listen to the info and move on. It's still really early in the year, so it's best to get started now if you're serious about your creative goals this year. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial on Skillshare. Once again, thank you Skillshare for sponsoring the video. One very useful way to practice any kind of lighting is to use 3D software to help you visualize the lighting setup. Clip Studio has their built-in 3D system, but you can easily use free options like Blender or this website to help you visualize certain lighting conditions on characters. Once you have the rough setup ready to go, you want to approach the scene with some sort of interpretation in mind instead of just blindly copying it. From here, we're just spawning more lights in different directions, but the main principle should remain the same. Now, the 3 main questions here are: where do we place the lights, how strong is each light, and what color does each of the lights have? Although Dino figures this out almost instinctively during the grayscale phase together with the anatomy, posing, and story, notice how he uses blobs of gray to carve out the form rather than going with the Japanese line art flat rendering method in this time lapse. This is obviously significantly harder to do, but at least he doesn't go all the way to color in one go. Neither should you. Dino adds colors after he figures out the values and uses gradient maps or layer modes to add the colors in. For example, in this piece with Fern, there are probably 3 lights being used. The first obvious key light coming from the right here, then we have a slightly more subtle rim light from the left here that has a reddish tone, and finally, to bring everything up, we have this fill light from the front to raise the brightness of the entire scene up. Once you know what's going on, figuring out the light shapes and the shadows are relatively simple. It's more about knowing the form of the body at this point. In a scene like this, even though it looks like there's only one light source coming from the outside like this, there's actually a second light source right here. Yeah, it's weird how the wall can be a light source, but remember how light takes on the color of the material it just reflected off of? This light coming from the window or the door, whatever it is, reflects off of this red wall onto the character, and you can see this cool reflected red light all over on this side of the character here. Again, in this piece, white key light here from the top left, and then you have the red ambient light all over the floor
from the ashes of her enemy.
But you also have a dose of stronger red light here at the bottom right because we can see the bottom planes of the character being lit up all over. You notice by now that the lights are usually placed in opposition with each other, with intensity being highly mismatched. There's usually a much stronger dominant light on the focal points of the piece and some other supporting lights for the rest of the figure. And this is how you want to set up your lights as well. The colors of the light being used are usually complementary as well. For example, if the main color is red here, Dino would use a soft blue light as the fill light, so you get this complementary color scheme going on between the skin and the hair of the character. I know that these might seem like really basic stuff, but the real magic happens when you combine a lot of these techniques together and use them in a realistic setting. When it comes to the placements, you don't really have to overthink it. Oftentimes, it's best to use whatever makes sense for the story or the scene. The blue ceiling light and this purple coming from the window, this morning window light from the side, the lamp on the table, and the soft ambient light coming from the window. Sometimes, all you need is a little story to help you fill in the blanks. And as promised, here is the bonus level. To really take things to the next level, Dino uses a combination of cast shadows and different edges to push his rendering even further. Hard edge, soft edge, and lost edge are the 3 types of edges that they most commonly used to manipulate the final look of a piece. Dino usually saves the hardest edges for focal points and defining boundaries between objects, since these creates the most contrast. A large portion of the drawing consists of either soft edges or lost edges. These are used when the form is rounded. For example, you wouldn't do a hard edge here because the arm is rounded, but this edge is hard because it's a cast shadow. Soft edges are really useful as well when you want to recreate a blurred effect on stuff, like the ribbons at the back here, the moving hair, the skirt, and the legs here. Cast shadows from a window or another object blocking the light can add another layer of storytelling to a drawing. It can also be a really powerful framing device when used correctly. Or this piece that's supposed to highlight her back instead of the face. Dino dampened the focus on the face by placing the light here, so that the big hat creates a cast shadow over the face. As you can tell, lighting is a powerful tool that can add another layer of storytelling to our drawings in unexpected ways. But what good can it do if you don't understand the very forms you're shining the lights on? Click on this video to watch me explain how Anatomy Expert 1010 break down anatomy forms in an easy and approachable way. Subscribe! Bye!